This is Nuke's node. This particular node is a grade node, but it's endemic of the nature of a node. Every single node inside of Nuke is communicating information to you with its mere display. So we're going to start looking at the various badges, widgets, and symbology that a node communicates to you as you use it. This grade node has three major components to it. First of all, it has a box shape. It is a rectangular box with 4 right angles. This particular shape tells you that a grade node operates in 2 dimensions. It is a 2D node. It also is a very light colored blue. Light blue nodes are part of the color correction family. You'll notice that when you create grades, color corrects, exposures, color lookups, they're all of the same color. They're all of the same shape. Also, this arrow is the input. This is where information comes into the node, and it is directional. It is flowing from over here through the arrow into the operator node. You can click on the arrow's tail to click, hold, and drag and try to connect it to other nodes. I'm going to create a dot node with the period key. And you can just disconnect it by clicking on the tail. You can also disconnect it by clicking on the arrowhead. But to connect, you must do it that way. All right. So this is the input. Now down here, this arrow is coming out of the node. It is the output. You can disconnect it that same way. You can disconnect it from the head or the tail, but either way, it is going in a flow, in a directional flow. Notice that when I select the node, it highlights, and it highlights what is coming in upstream. If I select the next node in the sequence, you can see that it's not only highlighting the incoming input, but also upstream what other things are in its flow. Let's disconnect that for now and shove that to the side. Now you'll also notice that each node has another input to the right side. This is called the mask input. As I drag it out, it is an optional input for masking the effect of that particular node. We'll get more into that later. Now over here, you'll see that the channels of this grade node are set to RGB. That is its default value. So it doesn't tell you that it's working on RGB. But if I select the drop down and choose something like alpha, the node gets much larger and it decides I am going to tell you that I'm only working on the alpha channel. If we go back to RGB, but uncheck one of the channels, such as blue, it now tells you that grade is now working on red and green, but not blue. If I deselect 2 of these, it will only let you know that it's working on that particular channel. So in its default state, it will tell you nothing. It just assumes you know, hey, I'm working on the RGB channels because that's the default state of the grade. Now we can do a couple other things with the grade node. I'm going to create a checkerboard and connect it to its input. Once it has something coming in, I want you to see what's happening here. These little symbols at the bottom of the node are telling you what channels it's operating on and what channels it is passing along. Above, we see the checkerboard has created by default red, green, blue, and an alpha channel. And notice that each of these little boxes is kind of like a rectangle, right? So that means that that node has now newly affected those channels. because they weren't there before. It created them, so it affected them. Now down in the grade node, because our grade node is set to operate only on the RGB channels, and if I move these values around, it shows that it is affecting the red, green, and blue. But because the alpha channel has changed from a wide rectangle to a small square, that in fact is saying I am not being affected by this grade. So let's do that to green. Let's say green is not affected. If I uncheck green, notice it now says grade is working on red and blue, but the visual channels are showing that red and blue are the ones that are being affected, and green and the alpha are unaffected. Now there's a couple other things we can do with this, and we can go over to the node tab. In the node tab, we can create a label. What is a label? Well, it can be anything you want it to be. Usually it should be useful information, like this is the grade for tinting window left or something like that. It should be something useful that you notate in your composite to help you remember and to communicate to others who may pick up your script later what this function was for. It's not always used, but many times it is. You can also change your font. You can make it ridiculous. I highly advise you never to do something like that. We can also disable this node. If we do not want it to function, we hit the D key with it highlighted, and you'll notice that checked off a box right here. Okay, that leaves the node in the flow, but disables it, turns it off effectively, and you'll immediately see this X running through the node. You know it has been disabled. Now, if it's disabled because it's linked via an expression and it's doing that, you'll see a single line through it instead of a cross. You can also hide the input of a node. And what that shows is that this node looks like it's not connected to anything, but it is. When you select it, it highlights it. It's usually a bad idea to do this because, again, at a single glance, you have no idea what this thing is connected to or what it's doing. So uncheck that. You can also use this as a postage stamp. Now, what is a postage stamp? It's this. It's that little small preview box that nodes will show you. So on here, if I select postage stamp, you can see that it's now showing a view of what that node is doing. If we go back to the grade and I actually change its color, you can see that the postage stamp is actually kind of like a mini viewer, mini composite. It's computationally heavy. It can add a few seconds here and there across an entire node network. Don't turn these on for any reason unless you absolutely need them, because even like a few seconds here and there across a 1,000 frame render will significantly alter your destiny. I'm going over here now. This one is completely set up with all the different things. We've got our labels, we got our what channels it's being affected by, but you can also see that this is saying RGB divide by mask.a divide by alpha. Now what this means is it's doing a pre-multiplication inside of the node, and that's what's happening right over here. You can see that if I uncheck this, it will turn that on and off. Now we're going to go around the different labels. Now you can also see that over here we had RGB and we have alpha, but what are these guys? Well, that's because this sequence has more than just RGBA. This has depth, it has motion vectors, and the green box all the way over here is other data. And other data is a way of Nuke communicating to you that there are many different render layers inside of this image sequence. So now we're going to go to these badges that are around Nuke here. This badge over here, this green E, means that this node is being driven by an expression. And what is that expression? Well, this green arrow to the right, this line coming in, is the expression link. Now, you can select Alt E, and that will disappear the expression link lines and reappear them. And it also does that with these orange ones over here, which are clone, and we'll get to that in a minute. But that's Alt E. Now these expression badges mean that there are expressions. The expressions control how other nodes control other nodes. So we have a grade 2 up here, and there's an expression coming in on the arrow into our grade node. So on grade 2, if I adjust the gamma, you can see that's adjusting the gamma on the other grade node in real time. As I adjust it up and down, it updates inside this node. Now, if we go up to the next badge, there's a M. This M up here is for masking. So this node is being masked not by a external input like the previous grade node, but this grade node is being masked by something inside. So if we look here, you can see it says mask, mask.a. If I uncheck that, that badge disappears. When this is on and I'm masking by an internal channel, it displays that badge so you know that it's being masked. Otherwise, when it's implemented, so you'll notice that, see how we have this input? If I switch this, that input goes away, it's not available, and now it's got that badge. And now it's errored because it doesn't have that. Okay. The A up here means animation. The minute you keyframe any knob inside of a node, it will assume this badge to tell you that it is being animated. So let's set a key on our gain and doop, and there you go. We've got that badge, and you can see that now it knows that there are keyframes on this node. If we delete the key, the badge goes away. And now over here, we have C. C is clone. So if I take this grade node and I clone it by doing Alt K, or we can also do Control K and paste, paste, paste. If you do Alt K, it basically does a single operation of copy, paste, but it creates clones. Now, all these clones are, notice that they are all called the same name. They're all grade 1. No matter which one you double click on, you get the same control panel. They will all update identically. And if you hit the Alt E, it hides the links, but they still have the badge. The V in the upper corner stands for multi-view. So just like before where we talked about doing join views and split views and having the multi-view workflow to work for different shots or stereo, if you have that and you are in a multi-view workflow, if you have controls that are separate, for example, in here we have two separate different controls. See, the left side has a value of 1, the right side has a value of 2. So it's showing you that it has been split and it is multi-view node. And then we have the X. The X is for mix. Mix is when you take the full effect of a node and dial it down. So mix set to 1 means that the node is fully working at 100%. If it's set down to 0, it's as if it's been disabled. But any value that is not 1 will give you the X. So I'm going to put this in at 0.999, and you can see there's an X because it's been mixed to some level. To find out the level, you have to open the control panel, but just visually it's letting you know, hey, I'm being mixed. And now we're going to take a look at some other nodes. Here we go. So these are all 2D nodes right here. They're all squares. They all have right angles and flat sides, but the orange colors are predominantly for your filter nodes, which will be right here. Most of them are like that. There are some that do not look like that, such as when you create an erode fast, it creates a dilate and it's gray. But if you do an erode filter, it's orange and says what it is. So different classes of nodes have different color associations, like the transformations are purple, the color corrects are blue, but all 2D nodes are in this shape. Now, 3D nodes have different shapes and a couple of different types of shapes. First of all, there are the true 3D nodes. So for like cards, objects, scenes, cameras, things that normally associated with 3D have these rounded edges. And some are more than just rounded edges, like the scene node that is a sphere or a circle. But notice that the scanline render and array render are both 2D shaped. That's because both of these nodes take 3D data, such as objects and cameras and scenes, and render them to 2D images. They're also attachable to things like particle emitters. Particle emitters and all the particle nodes right here are all this sort of shape. But notice how a particle merge is the same color as a 2D merge. But this merges 2D images, this merges particles. So there are color and shape associations, and the deep color, all deep nodes have this unique shape, which sit somewhere between 2D and 3D. Now let's look at a group. A group node is the definition of nodes within nodes. If I open this group node, I come over to the panel and there's an S, and I hit S, and that takes me inside of that node. And within that node, there are more nodes. Same thing with a gizmo. A gizmo is nothing more than a group node that has been saved out as a .gizmo file and then brought back into Nuke through the interface. Now, the advantage here is that it doesn't live inside the saved script. It lives on the disk as a .gizmo file, so you can easily update it to multiple users, but it is referenced in from an external source. So if you were to share that script and the other person doesn't have that gizmo installed on their machine, it will break and it will not work. Oftentimes, when I have a gizmo that I need to send to somebody, I will open the gizmo, go to the node panel right here. It says copy to group, and it basically turns the gizmo into a group, and that will save into the script because it is all the nodes inside saved away. Nodes within nodes. And then we have our input and our output nodes, which are shaped like trapezoids. And then there's the viewer node, which is a very unique node in the fact that it has many inputs, but they have these dotted lines, which are a little symbolic of the fact that it's the viewer. And every time you pull out a input, you can pull out another input and another input and another input. So those are Nuke's nodes and what they're trying to communicate to you. They're communicating many different things with their different badges, their different lines. The colors underneath all mean something important. and always pay attention to your nodes.